For more than 2,500 years, the word Nirvana has remained a sacred yet mysterious concept. It is often spoken of as the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice. But few truly understand what it really means. Some people imagine Nirvana as a kind of heaven, an eternal realm of bliss and rest. Others fear it is nothingness, a cold, empty state where existence simply ends. Yet the Buddha emphasized again and again, Nirvana cannot be captured in a few words. It is beyond all concepts and beyond language itself. So what is Nirvana? Really? Why has something so indescribable become the heart of the Buddhist path for over 500 million practitioners across centuries? And how can this understanding change the way we see life and suffering? Nirvana is not a place. One of the most common misunderstandings is that Nirvana is like a paradise. But in Buddhist teaching, even heavenly realms are still part of samsara, the cycle of birth and death, and beings there still experience change and suffering when their merit runs out. Nirvana does not belong to this cycle at all. It is not somewhere you can go. It transcends time and space altogether. Nirvana is not cold nothingness. Some fear Nirvana because they think it means total extinction, like falling into an empty void with no awareness. But the Buddha never described Nirvana as a state of blank oblivion. He spoke of it as the ending of suffering, because the roots of suffering, greed, hatred, and delusion, have been uprooted completely. When suffering ends, what remains is a state of profound peace, unbound by fear or craving, calm but fully awake. Nirvana is the end of greed, hatred, and delusion. To understand Nirvana, return to the basics, the third noble truth, the truth of the cessation of suffering. Since suffering is caused by greed, hatred, and ignorance, ending suffering does not require escaping to some other realm but rather facing and letting go of these roots within oneself. When the mind is free of craving, free of aversion, and clear of delusion, Nirvana is already present. Nirvana is absolute freedom. Consider this, all our lives, we are bound by desires, worries, anger, and envy. Nirvana is the total freedom from these mental chains. You still live in the world, breathe, feel joy and sadness, but your mind is no longer pulled around by old habits and illusions. Nirvana can be touched here and now. Nirvana is not only a distant goal for after death or countless lifetimes of practice. In many discourses, the Buddha taught that whenever the mind is free from greed, hatred, and delusion, Nirvana is right there in that very moment. A mindful breath, a moment of letting go, an act of unconditional compassion, all contain a glimpse of Nirvana. Nirvana cannot be described, only experienced. Why did the Buddha often refuse to define Nirvana in words? Because language is limited, but Nirvana goes beyond all concepts. It can only be known through direct experience, like tasting water for yourself and knowing whether it is hot or cold. Nirvana transforms how we see life. When you trust that Nirvana is possible, you no longer chase short-term pleasures as if they were ultimate. When you understand that Nirvana is the end of suffering, you have the courage to look deeply into your cravings, attachments, and anger. Each step of the path becomes meaningful, because you are no longer living just to satisfy the ego, but to free yourself from its illusions altogether. And this is why, after more than 2,500 years, Nirvana remains a timeless gateway, one that every sincere practitioner keeps quietly knocking on, knowing that no definition can ever contain what it truly is. Part 1. Nirvana is not a place. When people hear the word Nirvana, many imagine a distant realm, radiant with light, filled with eternal peace and joy. Like a heavenly paradise reserved for those who have attained perfect enlightenment. This image is beautiful but does not truly match what the Buddha taught more than 2,500 years ago. Nirvana is not a place you can go to with your feet, nor is it a realm waiting at the end of a lifetime. It does not exist in the past or future, and it cannot be found on any map. Nirvana is not something outside of us, it is a profound inner realization that can only be experienced directly through the mind. In the Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha repeatedly emphasized that nirvana is the complete cessation of suffering, the uprooting of greed, hatred, and delusion. These three fires are what keep us trapped in endless cycles of rebirth and suffering, binding us to the world of birth and death. When someone truly sees the impermanent nature of all things and understands how craving and fear bind the mind, they naturally begin to let go. In that very moment, when the mind no longer chases after desires or clings to the fear of loss, nirvana reveals itself. This may sound abstract, but it is deeply practical. When you clearly observe a moment of anger arise and pass away without letting it control your words or actions, that is a glimpse of nirvana. When you return to your breath and let go of endless worries for just a moment, you are nurturing the seed of nirvana within you. Nirvana does not require you to run away from the world or hide from everyday life. It does not mean disappearing from reality. On the contrary, nirvana can be present right in the middle of daily life, work, relationships, duties, but without being bound or pulled around by them. The one who has touched nirvana lives fully in the world but is no longer enslaved by it, no longer swept away by gain and loss, praise and blame, joy and sorrow. In truth, everyone has the capacity to taste nirvana, even if only for a fleeting moment. And those moments become the seeds for a greater journey, the path toward absolute inner freedom, where every chain of attachment dissolves, and every fear of gain and loss has nowhere left to hold on. So, if someone asks, where is nirvana? The answer is not in a painting of paradise or in a dream of some faraway realm after death. Nirvana is total freedom, right here and now. When the mind is no longer dragged around by desire and fear. This is the most precious doorway the Buddha left for humankind. Nirvana is not a place to reach, it is the possibility of unconditional freedom, right here, in this very moment. Part 2, Nirvana does not mean nothingness. Throughout more than 500 years of Buddhist history, many people, even some who study Buddhism only on the surface, have misunderstood nirvana as a kind of cold nothingness. They imagine that reaching nirvana means the total extinction of the soul, mind, or any trace of self, dissolving into an empty void where nothing exists and nothing can be felt. Because of this misunderstanding, some people fear nirvana, because what human being does not fear total oblivion? But if we look deeply into what the Buddha actually taught, we see something very different. Nirvana is not the destruction of consciousness or the erasure of life, but the extinguishing of the causes that feed suffering. The Buddha used a simple but profound image: the three fires, greed, hatred, and delusion, burn inside every human mind. These flames keep the cycle of rebirth alive, pushing us endlessly from craving to regret, from grasping at pleasure to fearing loss. Nirvana does not destroy the being, it ends the fuel that keeps these fires burning. When craving no longer feeds the flame, when hatred settles down, when ignorance is cleared away, the fire of samsara naturally goes out. No divine force puts it out. No one kills it, the flame simply cannot survive without fuel. Think of a flame flickering on a dry branch. If you stop adding fuel, if the wood is used up, the flame will naturally die out. No one snuffs it out by force, it ends because the conditions that sustain it are gone. This is the essence of nirvana. Nirvana, then, is not a cold, empty void as many fear. On the contrary, it is a state of clarity, ease, and profound calm. When greed, hatred, and delusion no longer burn the mind, what remains is its true nature, still, clear, awake. It is like a lamp shining in the darkness, but its light no longer depends on the smoke and heat of destructive fuel. Instead, it radiates the pure brightness of wisdom and compassion. Many great practitioners have said, nirvana is not the end, it is a return. A return to the mind's true luminous nature, no longer clouded by confusion or consumed by craving and anger. It is not meaningless emptiness, it is the boundless space in which wisdom and compassion can fully unfold. For this reason, genuine practitioners do not fear nirvana, they fear not reaching nirvana. Because without nirvana, the fire of suffering continues to burn, consuming life after life, binding us to the endless cycle of becoming. The Buddha never asked you to abandon life or innocent joy. He simply pointed out that there is a kind of fuel you no longer need, the fuel of greed, anger, and ignorance. Once you stop feeding it, the fire of suffering naturally fades, leaving behind a vast, peaceful, radiant space. And this is the real nirvana, not nothingness, not destruction, but true liberation. Part 3. Nirvana cannot be grasped by ordinary understanding. One of the reasons nirvana often seems so mysterious or unbelievable to many people is because it cannot be defined using the usual dualistic concepts we rely on. We tend to ask questions like, is nirvana real or not? Does it exist or not? When does it begin? Does it end? But all these questions come from the ordinary way our minds divide reality into opposites, existence versus non-existence, birth versus death, beginning versus end. Yet in many discourses, the Buddha made it clear, nirvana does not belong to the realm of existence or non-existence. It does not follow the law of arising and ceasing like all conditioned things in the material or mental world. Nirvana is not born, so it cannot die. It does not exist like an object or a heaven one can visit. Nor is it simply empty nothingness without meaning. Because it goes beyond all opposites. Buddhism describes nirvana with words like unborn, unceasing, formless, unconditioned. Unborn, nirvana is not created by anyone, it does not appear because of some external wish or ritual. Unceasing. It does not disappear when the body dies or when circumstances change. Formless, it has no shape, image, or place you can point to. Unconditioned. It cannot be manufactured, by force of will or by grasping for it as an achievement. These words may sound abstract, but they point to something deeply practical. Only when the mind truly stops clinging, stops dividing reality into this and that, stops chasing after control or rejection, can it touch the silent state beyond thought. Many Zen and Buddhist masters emphasize this over and over. Nirvana cannot be taught through explanations, it can only be tasted through direct experience. In one moment. When you drop the urge to manipulate everything, when you even let go of the thought, I am practicing to reach nirvana, you create the conditions for the seed of nirvana to open. It is no longer a theory or a distant goal, it is the natural calm that is always there beneath layers of thought and craving. In the deepest traditions of meditation, great teachers rarely answer directly when asked, what is nirvana? Instead, they might just smile, or give an unexpected reply that breaks the student's habitual thinking. They do this to help the seeker turn back inward, to observe the mind that is asking the question. In that silent looking, the mind stops searching for answers in words and begins to taste what words can never hold. As long as we keep trying to grasp nirvana with concepts and logic, we stand outside its door. Only when we release that grasping does the door open by itself, needing no explanation. That is why the Buddha and so many masters have said, nirvana cannot be explained, it can only be experienced. And only through direct experience can we realize that it does not belong to language, it belongs to complete stillness and perfect freedom. Part 4. Nirvana is the ultimate goal of the spiritual journey. If you have ever wondered, what is the true purpose of Buddhist practice, the answer comes down to two words, enlightenment and nirvana. All the sutras, meditation techniques, moral precepts, and ways of living that the Buddha left behind point toward a single goal, to help people see reality clearly and, through that insight, end all suffering at its root. In Buddhism, enlightenment, bodhi, means seeing for yourself the true nature of all phenomena. Everything is impermanent, nothing lasts forever. Everything is non-self, there is no fixed, I, or unchanging soul controlling things behind the scenes. Everything is empty of inherent existence, there is nothing solid to cling to or possess. When a person deeply realizes this truth, all attachment, grasping, and fear lose their grip. And in that very moment, Nirvana naturally reveals itself, like a clear sky appearing when the storm clouds dissolve. In many teachings, the Buddha emphasized again and again that there is no other path apart from the cultivation of morality, sila, concentration, samadhi, and wisdom, panna. Morality means living an ethical life, guarding your actions, speech, and mind so they do not cause harm to yourself or others. Concentration means developing deep focus and mindfulness, so the mind becomes steady and clear instead of being scattered by endless thoughts. Wisdom means directly seeing the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self nature of all things. When these three aspects come together, the mind gains the strength and clarity to cut through the roots of suffering. Once the roots are severed, suffering naturally comes to an end, like a flame dying out when there is no more fuel to burn. Importantly, nirvana is not a reward given by a god or any higher power to the faithful. Nor is it a special favor for those who beg for it. Nirvana is the natural state of the mind once ignorance and delusion are cleared away. A mind no longer burned by greed, hatred, and delusion naturally becomes calm, pure, and unmoved by gain or loss. For this reason, the entire Buddhist path, whether you are a layperson or a monastic, whether you practice meditation, uphold precepts, or study the Dharma, ultimately leads to the same goal, to end every chain that binds the mind and to return to the state of deep inner freedom and peace. This is nirvana. Reaching nirvana does not mean escaping life, it means living fully in this world without being controlled or dragged around by it. When you understand this, you see that every mindful breath, every good deed, every moment of meditation or reciting the teachings is a step on the path back to nirvana, the clear sky that has always been there behind the clouds of craving and confusion. Part 5. Nirvana ends the cycle of suffering and rebirth. According to Buddhist teachings, we human beings, and indeed all sentient beings, wander through countless lifetimes, moving endlessly from birth to old age, from sickness to death, only to be born again. This never-ending cycle is called samsara, the round of suffering, driven by karma and craving. Every thought, word, and deed leaves an imprint in the mind. These karmic seeds shape the conditions of our future experiences. Life after life, we carry these seeds forward. Like a river that never stops flowing, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always moving under the force of ignorance, desire, and aversion. What keeps this cycle turning? The Buddha taught that it is our clinging and ignorance, the illusions that there is a separate, permanent self that must be protected, satisfied, or made special. Out of that illusion comes endless grasping for pleasure, fear of loss, and resistance to change. Together, these forces bind us to samsara, the great wheel of becoming. Nirvana is the ending of this wheel. It is not a place one goes to after death, nor a reward given by some higher being. It is the direct result of seeing reality as it truly is and cutting through the roots of suffering. When the mind sees that all things are impermanent and empty of self, when it lets go of grasping at cravings and fears, there is nothing left to feed the fires of becoming. Without fuel, the cycle of birth and death loses its engine. Samsara can no longer continue when there is no more clinging to birth and no fear of death. In this sense, nirvana is the ultimate freedom, the total liberation from every form of forced becoming. There is no more rebirth into suffering because there is no more ignorance to drive it. The mind is no longer tossed about by desire or aversion, it abides in perfect stillness, unattached to form, time, or identity. Sometimes people misunderstand this to mean that the person disappears, or is wiped out. But in truth, there was never a permanent self to begin with, only a stream of conditions. Nirvana simply means the end of this conditioned stream running in circles fueled by delusion. What remains is the pure, unbound nature of mind, peaceful, awake, and beyond birth and death. The Buddha described nirvana as the unconditioned, the ultimate peace, the highest happiness. It is the timeless freedom from all forms of bondage, the full release from the endless round of becoming and perishing. So, in the deepest sense, the goal of the spiritual path is not to gain something new, but to stop feeding what keeps us trapped. When clinging ceases, samsara ceases. What is left is not extinction into nothingness, but the discovery of a freedom that has no limits, untouched by the ups and downs of life and death. This is why monks, nuns, and lay practitioners all follow the path of virtue, meditation, and wisdom, not just to make life more comfortable now, but to break free from the very root of suffering, the wheel of birth and death itself. To realize nirvana is to know a peace beyond all conditions, the freedom that the Buddha called the supreme ending of suffering. Part 6. Nirvana is not reserved for a special few. One of the most remarkable and radical teachings of the Buddha is this: nirvana is not the exclusive right of any one group or social class. Unlike the rigid systems of caste or privilege common in his time, and even in many spiritual traditions today, the Buddha declared that the path to liberation is open to all beings, regardless of birth, wealth, background, gender, or status. You do not have to be a monk or nun, you do not have to shave your head and leave your family behind. You do not have to spend decades in a remote monastery enduring extreme hardship to glimpse nirvana. While those who devote their entire lives to the monastic path do create powerful conditions for deep practice, the essence of the Buddha's teaching is that awakening is possible here and now, for anyone who practices sincerely and wisely. The Dharma, the truth of how suffering arises and how it can end, is not locked away in secret doctrines or rituals for a chosen elite. The Buddha made it clear, what he realized under the Bodhi tree was a universal law. He did not invent it, he uncovered it and taught it so that anyone, anywhere, could test it for themselves. Nirvana is not a privilege to be earned by pleasing a god, buying favors through offerings, or proving worth through social status. It is the natural state of the mind when ignorance, craving, and clinging have been released. And the door to that freedom is always present within your own mind, no matter who you are. A householder raising children, a farmer working the fields, a merchant trading in the marketplace, all can practice mindfulness, ethical living, and cultivate wisdom in daily life. Moments of letting go, moments of deep clarity. Moments when the mind rests free from its usual grasping, these are glimpses of nirvana, available in ordinary life. Over the centuries, countless lay people, not just monks, have experienced profound peace and insight by living simply, watching their minds, and applying the Buddha's path in daily routines. There are many stories in the suttas of kings, merchants, servants, and even criminals who found freedom in a single moment of deep understanding. What matters is not your title or role in society but the quality of your heart and mind, your willingness to see clearly, to let go of what causes harm, and to nurture compassion and insight. Nirvana does not ask who you are, it responds to the sincerity and depth of your practice. This is why the Buddha often said, "Be a lamp unto yourselves." The Dharma is like a path through the forest, it is open to all, but you must walk it yourself. The only requirement is that you dare to look within, to train the mind, to keep planting seeds of mindfulness and wisdom, whether in a temple or in your home, on a mountain or in the city. No matter who you are or where you find yourself, nirvana is never far away. It is not something new that must be built, it is the timeless peace already within you, waiting patiently behind every thought, every desire, every fear. When the mind is humble enough to stop grasping for more, when it is patient enough to keep coming back to the present moment, the truth of nirvana quietly reveals itself, not as a reward, but as the deepest nature of your own awareness, free and unbound. Part 7, Nirvana is not far away, it is here and now. Perhaps the most profound reminder the Buddha offered us is this. Nirvana is not some distant promise reserved for another lifetime, nor is it hidden away in a far-off realm we must wait to reach after death. It is not locked behind rituals or reserved for saints and sages alone. Nirvana is the immediate possibility that opens whenever the mind truly lets go. In many sutras, the Buddha emphasized that the peace we long for is not something to chase in the future, it is something we remember in the present, when craving and aversion fall away. The moment you pause the endless chase for more, the moment you stop feeding anger and resentment, the moment you see that all things arise and pass away without clinging, in that very moment, a taste of nirvana appears. It is not magic. It is not a blessing that drops from the sky. It is not reserved for a holy few after lifetimes of sacrifice. It is simply the natural state of the mind when it is not entangled in illusions, the mind as it really is when free from the fires of greed, hatred, and ignorance. The beauty of this teaching is that you do not need to wait for another life, or for all your conditions to be perfect. You do not need to travel to a remote monastery or abandon your everyday life. You only need to turn inward, to observe your own mind carefully, honestly, and patiently. Each time you see a thought arise and fall without grasping, you touch a little bit of nirvana. Each moment you forgive instead of holding a grudge, you open the door a little wider. Each breath taken in mindful awareness plants the seed of awakening. This is why so many great masters remind us, nirvana is not somewhere else, it is the end of grasping, here and now. It is the stillness underneath the noise. The spaciousness beneath the burdens you carry. It does not arrive with fanfare. It does not announce itself with lightning and thunder. It is gentle, so quiet that unless you slow down, you might miss it completely. You do not have to make nirvana happen. You simply have to stop feeding what hides it. When greed, anger, and delusion lose their fuel, what remains is the pure awareness that has always been here, unnoticed under layers of distraction. So in truth, nirvana is not a goal to reach in the far future. It is a truth to be recognized in the depth of your own heart, again and again, one mindful moment at a time. The next time you sit in silence, or take a single mindful breath, remember. This very mind, clear, aware, and unattached, is already tasting nirvana, here and now. I hope that after this video, you will see nirvana in a closer, more intimate way, not as some vague or distant idea, but as a genuine state of deep peace and freedom that can begin to take root right here in this very life. Nirvana does not belong only to saints or sages living in caves. It is not locked away in another world or promised only after death. It is a living possibility, hidden in each moment when your mind lets go of clinging, when you see clearly, and when your heart rests open and free. You do not have to wait for perfect conditions or hope for miracles from outside. Each breath, each step, each honest moment of self-observation can reveal a glimpse of this timeless freedom. When you pause, watch your mind without judgment, and soften your grasp on your fears and desires, even for a moment, you are tasting the beginning of nirvana. So if you found this video helpful or inspiring, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the Dharma Journey. Together, we will keep exploring the teachings of the Buddha, the practice of meditation, and the hidden depths of the mind, the very mysteries of life, death, and awakening that we all share as human beings. And I would truly love to hear from you. What does nirvana mean to you? Have you ever felt a moment of deep inner stillness, free from grasping and fear, even for just a heartbeat? Feel free to share your reflections in the comments below. Your insight may touch and inspire someone else on the path, too. Thank you so much for taking this time to listen, to reflect, and to walk a few steps deeper into the Dharma with me. May you stay peaceful and awake, clear like the sky, steady like a mountain, and open like the ocean within. May you be well, free, and mindful, always.